Welcome, my dear students. Today we are in the 8th week and this is going to be the 4th lecture. In the last lecture, we specifically mentioned about the different issues of e-waste management. What are the possible options we have, particularly those metallurgical options, whether it is hydro, whether it is pyro, whether it is bio mediated process of metallurgical intervention for achieving the best recovery of those material, particularly that electronic waste. And also we have seen the global context, the global perspective, although we didn't discuss that particular component in detail, but definitely we have seen that there are initiatives, particularly those initiatives are always very pro-initiative if we look at the developed world. But if it is the developing world or the underdeveloped world, definitely there are still, it's a many way to move or many miles to move. And at the same time, we also have seen that those issues, because there are multiple issues are involved, particularly with reference to this electronic or this electrical accessories based waste management, and at the same time there are issues related to EPR. We are going to discuss on that today with length, as well as the investment, which is very, very important, particularly once we talk about this electronic waste, because this particular waste is as I said in the earlier lecture, that the growth is very, very fast. So once the growth is very fast and once we are likely to produce more and more electronic waste, definitely we have to have that sort of investment. And this investment is basically aimed to make some sort of innovation on those recovery processes. In today's class, we are just going to give emphasis mostly on these electronic waste management rules. We will like to see some of the global context as well, that what is happening in Asia, what is happening in Europe, and who are doing the best sort of management practices or the good management practices who is practicing. And at the same time, under Indian context, we will like to see this electronic or this electrical waste management rule, which is there 2016. And we will like to see that what are the different features of these particular rules. And then definitely we will also try to find it out, definitely once you have a rule in practice, but still there are few discrepancies still exist. So definitely the challenges we will also like to see. So in today's lecture, as I already mentioned, the main focus would be always on key features of electronic waste management rules 2016 and the challenges of this particular electronic waste management. So whenever we talk about these electronic waste management rules, they always warrant some sort of structured management or structured which is going to, and which is basically accountable as well. That means these are always aimed to address the growing challenge of these electronic waste through your structured and accountable measures. And definitely it is at the apex, the producer have a accountability. By incorporating, particularly producers are legally obligated to manage the life cycle of their electronic products, whatever they are producing or whatever innovations they are making. So ensuring proper collection and recycling. So these things has to be done hand in hand. And this shifts the burden from consumers and government to manufacturers. Definitely, it's a responsibility by the manufacturer, and who is going to take that sort of involvement of those technologies or introducing those sort of interventions in between. And once we are going to do that, definitely we have to protect our environment, because environment is always at the most important priority. So by prohibiting these unsafe practices, we mentioned many of them, such as open burning and unscientific disposal, and this basically reflects a clear commitment for protecting your human health, your environmental health, your ecosystem health. We already talked in detail on this. Then structured recycling goals, that what what is that objectivity of, doing that sort of reuse, recycle, right? So in that particular context, that 3R approach, definitely once we talk about reduce, reuse and recycle, definitely we have to have, a definitive target to achieve this effective recycling and waste management. And consumer inclusion, that means whatever approach we are going to take or whatever these waste management rules or act is going to incorporate, definitely it has to be an inclusive one. So by encouraging responsible disposal by consumer and bulk user promotes awareness and active participation, making waste management a collaborative effort. It's not something any individual can, or it's not the responsibility of an individual, definitely it's a collective work. And finally, technological advancement will be always there. That means the way technology is advancing, we have to take leverage of those technologies which are available, particularly for those recycling one. So that means by including newer and smarter electronic components, definitely we will be able to, make sure that whatever things we are using, that is, that is not having that sort of components of heavy metals or metalloid sort of thing. Adapt to emerging technologies and their environment impact. This is very, very important. And I was talking about those extended producer responsibility authorization. This is very important, particularly, and this particular applicable for producers of those electrical and electronic equipment or plastic. That means whenever we talk about these EPR, definitely, this electronic waste will be there as well as your plastic waste, both will be there. And people who consume large quantities of these electronic gadget or equipment, importers of electrical and electronic equipment, and dismantlers, and the collection centers basically who is doing this sort of, dismantling operations. So they will be, they have to have that sort of EPR authorization, and this is very important. This is a, you can tell this becomes a precursor for going ahead further. And these EPR authorization definitely holds some significant implications for both environmental conservation as well as responsible corporate practice. So this is going to be very, very important, particularly, in making your organization or that particular means with reference to the collective responsibility of your organization for the rest part of the society. And for achieving or for gaining this or for receiving this sort of EPR authorization, you need to have multiple steps. Initially you have to apply, that means application submission, and that is there in your CPCB portal. And then KYC has to be submitted, and those documents related to that, what is the amount you are bringing and how much amount you are dismantling, whatever it is, the total amount and the nature of composition of those particular electronic or electrical gadgets or items. Document review, once you submit those particular documents or those details, so the authorities, they used to go ahead with the review work. And then verification and investigation, that means at the ground truth to to see that whether it really exists like that, or whether you have that sort of infrastructure, or whether you are procuring more, or you are just mentioning less. So that verification is done, and finally authorization is being granted to that particular, whether you talk about those producers, whether you talk about those particular maybe importers or dismantlers. So they will be provided that particular extended EPR certificate. And now if you look at the electronic waste management in Asia, because we will be talking about with more reference to your India, definitely we have to have some sort of idea that how things are moving, or how things are going ahead in the other parts of the globe. So many countries in Asia have implemented these policies to address this issue, and this particular EPR, I was giving emphasis, this is extended producer responsibility, and they have adopted these EPR policies, and this is very stringent and very strict laws are there and requiring manufacturers to take the responsibility. It's not only, just producing, but at the same time the recycling and, taking it back, and then if you are giving some sort of new innovations or smarter technologies, definitely it is your responsibility to do all those associated things, and recycling, as I said. Informal recycling sector, because this is very important, particularly in countries like your India and Indonesia. A significant proportion of these, basically this particular waste, is handled by informal recyclers. So they have to be trained, they have to be, sensitized that what are the lethal impacts if they are not properly handling it. So that has to be done, because otherwise it is going to impact your environment as well as your human health. Then regional collaboration, whether it is across those different countries. So this is a must, and particularly organization like your United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific have been working on these sustainable e-waste management strategies for this particular region. Then there is a dedicated organization, particularly Global E-Waste Monitor, who reports like this. Particular Global E-Waste Monitor basically provide insights into trends and challenges of this e-waste management across Asia, and time to time, and this is on on real-time basis, things have been updated. And if we look at Africa, Africa is not in a proper shape. It's having a huge challenge, particularly with reference to informal recycling. This informal recycling, because a significant portion of this electronic waste is processed informally, particularly in Africa, and often using unsafe methods. And if you are using unsafe methods, definitely you are contributing to those sort of changes in your climate, which pose definitely your health and environmental risk. And then illegal imports. This is also very common because either it is being done intentionally, or it is knowingly, you are just procuring it from some other countries illegally. So these receives large quantities of electronic waste, but they don't have that sort of resources or those sort of infrastructure to handle it. But still, if you have, definitely you will be using those sort of informal sectors, will be very active in recycling those, and all of us can understand that what is going to be the effect. Policy and legislation. Some countries like Ghana, Nigeria and South Africa have implemented these e-waste policies and regulations to address these issues. They are coming up. That means sensitization is there. Economic potential. These electronic waste contains valuable materials like your gold, copper and aluminum, offering opportunities for sustainable recycling and economic growth. Definitely, if they are capable to convert or recover out of it, definitely it is going to be a win-win situation, but it has to be done in rational way. Awareness and education, which is missing, particularly in case of Africa. So there are efforts are underway to raise this awareness about the danger of improper e-waste disposal and give them that sort of sensitization. If we look at Europe, this is governed by the Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment Directive, and which aims to reduce this environmental impact of your electronic waste, and there are a few key points. This particular WEEE directive sets ambitious targets for the collection, recycling and recovery of your electronic waste. For example, mostly the countries which are covered under your European Union, they are required to collect 65% of the average weight of these electronic equipment placed on the market in the previous 3 years. That is, they have to follow that sort of directive. Producer responsibility, we talked about that earlier, that manufacturers and importers are financially responsible for those collection, for treatment, as well as recycling of their products. And they can either set up their own system to join collective compliance of those schemes. So this can be done with collaboration, as well as if somebody is capable, they can do it on their own. Harmonized reporting. The directive establishes a harmonized format for reporting and registering these particular producers to ensure consistency across those particular member states. Illegal exports. Measures are in place to combat these particular illegal exports of these electronic waste, ensuring proper treatment within your European Union. And definitely, once you are able to address these issues, you will be aligning with particularly your circular economy goal, and the directive supports those European Union transition to a circular economy by promoting the reuse and recycling of your valuable materials found in your electronic waste. And most importantly, once we talk about those developed world, and these part of the world, particularly Scandinavia, they are doing excellent, particularly with reference to this recycling and those, recovery of those resources. That means that sort of infrastructure they have. That means this Scandinavian country is a leader, particularly in sustainable waste management, setting an example for the rest of the world, known for its advanced sustainable e-waste management practices. And if we look at Sweden, Sweden has one of the most efficient e-waste collection system globally. It emphasizes reverse logistics, where e-waste is collected from residents and processed for recycling. The country also prioritizes waste to energy solution, converting waste into electricity and that particular heating process. Norway has implemented extended producer responsibility, that EPR, requiring manufacturers to take responsibility for the collection and recycling of your electronic waste. Public awareness campaigns have also been successful for this particular purpose. And Denmark basically focuses on material recycling and reuse, aiming to minimize your landfill waste. That means recycling is very, very important for all of these Scandinavian countries. The country has strict regulation to ensure safe handling and processing of your hazardous components of e-waste. We have already, during that composition of electronic waste, we have seen there are multiple hazardous materials they may carry, or it is there within their component, within that component. It is a part of that component. So they have that sort of strategy. And now if we look at India, basically these electronic waste management rules 2016, an overview, and there are a few challenges as well. This particular 2016 were introduced by your Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India, and the idea was all same, to regulate this, particularly with reference to your handling, recycling of these electronic waste in the country. And these replaced basically the rules that was existing during 2011, that was Electronic Waste Management and Handling Rules 2011. And basically it has expanded its scope of regulation and strengthening enforcement mechanisms. And also there are a few amendments related to the flexibility of this particular rules as well. That means it's a user friendly sort of thing. And these electronic waste management, we have seen that it's a challenge, it's a huge challenge. And definitely the government wanted to ensure you have to have maintenance of your environmental health as well as your human health should be kept at priority. So if you wanted to keep with the pace of the this particular development, impairment doesn't take place, particularly with reference to natural resources or this environment, definitely it is going to be a very, very good state. So this particular rule which is there, electronic waste management rules in India, we already mentioned that, and this particular rule actually take into account all the thing which we have discussed with the other context or with the other countries with definitive the consequences we know. So with the other countries, the way they are facing or they are handling, we have taken most of those components with reference to your extended producer responsibility. We'll be talking about more in that. Then recycling targets must meet phased recycling targets, right, and ensuring proper disposal. And then EPR certificate, I mentioned that because this is now these things are being done more authenticity and with more vibrancy. Because if somebody is applying for this, so now within a very short period of time, things are means the certificate is being approved if everything, all the documents are in place. So, and consumer responsibility, this is also this particular act has been capable to make that sort of sensitization related to this consumer responsibility. Consumers and bulk consumers are encouraged to dispose this particular electronic waste responsibility through authorized collection center. There are a few dedicated centers are there. So that has also been taken into consideration. Prohibited practices, that sort of informal processing, this has been taken very seriously, right? Open burning or this unscientific disposal of this electronic waste is strictly prohibited to prevent your environmental and these health hazards. And so this was there. And inclusion of solar panels, this has been very recently been included in 2022. Rules include solar photovoltaic modules, panels or cells with specific provisions for their management also. So this is very important because once we are going ahead for that sort of non-conventional energy sector, definitely we need to take into those components which are coming out from that particular industry as well. So this is, I was mentioning about that particular portal which actually take into account all those actions, and this is a dedicated portal. If we look at that 2016 act, through that I mentioned that if you are applying for EPR, definitely there are those provisions are here, you can see. And I mentioned about those rules, whatever those all details, what are the things and how to go ahead with that sort of, if somebody is going ahead with that sort of dismantling operations, right, or collections and then procurement. So what are those necessary protocols that has to be followed. So everything is mentioned over here. So this is a owner initiative, and through this dedicated portal one can always go ahead with managing this particular electronic waste rationally. And now what I was mentioning, the key features of this particular electronic waste management rules 2016, I will go one by one. The first thing already we discussed, that extended producer responsibility EPR, and this becomes a mandatory particularly for producers, requiring them to collect and recycle this electronic waste through your registered recyclers. So, and those registered recyclers lists are also there. So one can always be in touch with them, and then they can proceed further. Producers must set up collection mechanism, including buyback programs, deposit fund schemes and drop-off centers. So what is that standard protocol they have to fix, and they have to find out those mechanisms. So how best to collect or those particular resources. And this introduction of this EPR authorization, making it necessary for producers to get approval from once for getting an approval certificate from CPCB, this is a must, means EPR authorization is a must. Scope expansion, the rules apply to manufacturers, producers, consumer, bulk consumer, collection center, dismantler and recycler. That means everybody, it has a wider range basically, wider group is being included in the whole act and whole this particular rules in 2016. So that so everybody is involved. So once you involve everybody, there is always a collective responsibility will work definitely for sure. Then the target based collection system. Producers must meet collection target based on the percentage of products sold in the previous year. So whether they are going to do it 60%, 70% or 50% in the last 3 years. So based on that, so that is being fixed, and this is, you can see over here, phase-wise implementation of targets. 30% collection in the first 2 years, right? 40% in the next 2 years, in 2018 to 20, 50% in the 5th and 6th year, and 70% from the 7th year onwards. So that means, this is going to, this phase-wise implementation of this particular target has to be there, means, and once we are collecting that particular electronic waste from there. The responsibility of stakeholder is going to be definitely with reference to your manufacturer. You need to ensure environmentally sound management of your electronic waste generated during this production. Bulk consumer, particularly offices, institution, we have seen that what are those places, particularly if you talk about those public, private places, hospitals. So they require to maintain these electronic waste records and hand over this. That means, you need to have a logbook of everything over waste only to your authorized recycler. And once you are, sending this particular waste material, definitely those agencies, they have to be also, authorized by your CPCB. Recyclers and dismantlers must get authorization from the Pollution Control Board, I already mentioned, and ensure proper disposal. Prohibition of illegal e-waste handling. This is very important. Strict ban on informal e-waste processing, basically which often involves hazardous methods like acid baths and open burning, and encouragement for formal sector participation to improve recycling efficiency. So this is very, very important, particularly if you wanted to get rid of that issues of environmental or human health. Definitely one has to ensure that informal processing has to be skipped, otherwise it's very difficult. And role of state and central pollution control board, they have definitive roles to play, and they have to be very, very vibrant and sensitive and make people sensitize about the existing rules. And if there are few changes, definitely it is their responsibility to make them aware. So responsible for monitoring compliance and granting EPR authorization and ensuring targets are met, whether that sort of I mentioned about those 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, 70% sort of thing. So whether they are phase based targets being met. And the State Pollution Control Board oversee basically implementation of the state level and ensure illegal your e-waste handling is controlled. And during this particular once you are going to introduce or you wanted to intervene with these sort of rules and you wanted to introduce to your system, definitely there will be few challenges always, and these challenges are always there whenever it is going to be implemented, right. So you have a weak enforcement of this EPR. So many producers fail to meet these collection targets due to your poor enforcement and lack of accountability. So that enforcement agency, as I was giving emphasis, enforcement agency has to be very, very vibrant, right, and accountable also. And insufficient regulatory oversight and enforcement mechanism. So this has to be also there. This is also very, very important. And non-compliance by informal business, which dominates basically this e-waste recycling in India. So this is a huge challenge, particularly the first and foremost important challenge is this weak enforcement. That means, this is something the public sector has to play an important role. And then informal sector dominance, right? Over 90% of your electronic waste in India is processed by your informal sector using your hazardous methods, already we mentioned, whether you talk about acid bathing, whether you talk about incineration. So definitely if you are going ahead with those sort of informal mode of recycling, definitely that problem is going to be there. Lack of incentives for informal workers to shift to formal regulated recycling processes. This is also very, very important. We need to appreciate them, otherwise they are not going to do, and they are going to do all those conventional modes of doing it. And low consumer awareness, this is going to be another very important, particularly with reference to there are many countries, particularly if we look in our case, lack awareness about this particular proper e-waste disposal and continue to sell old electronics to scrap dealers instead of authorized recyclers. So this is a common happening. And limited availability of your official collection center, and which basically discourages your proper disposal. And poor infrastructure of your e-waste collection, this is another very important point. Insufficient collection centers and recycling facilities, especially in smaller cities and rural areas. Because now this electronic waste is not something which is being generated only in cities. It is also coming up in rural areas and those semi-urban and peri-urban areas as well. So definitely those smaller cities and those rural areas has to be taken into account. But we don't have that sort of collection center. So inadequate investment in advanced recycling technologies. That means for one, if somebody is going ahead for innovation, definitely you need to invest. The challenges in tracking and reporting. We don't have that sort of tracking and reporting mechanism in practice, and many companies under-report their e-waste generation, that what is being generated. So this is under-reporting is also going to be a very, very important issue. We have also illegal e-waste imports. Despite this Basel Convention restriction, large amount of these electronic wastes are illegally imported into India under this pretext of your second-hand goods. And there are, in few cities, the second-hand goods are very common. And so definitely we need to be very careful about these illegal e-waste imports, and weak custom regulations make it easy for e-waste shipments to enter the country. So this is, you have a role over here. So once, somebody is coming from abroad or from other part of the world, definitely you need that sort of more vigilance. Cost of recycling. Scientific recycling methods are always costly, because you need, if you are going for, innovations and sophistications, so definitely you have to, invest more. And stakeholders may be reluctant to invest in sustainable practices without adequate financial incentives. So in today's lecture, what we try to understand, basically with the legal provisions, and the legal provisions, we also, try to see that what's happening in the different parts of the world, whether it is, the Asia, the whether it is your Africa and whether it is Europe, and whether that the management is being done particularly in Scandinavia, we have seen, right, the best management practices, particularly with reference to the using of or utilizing these definitive resources or infrastructure for recycling. So they have done a very good job with reference to making sensitivity among your the different groups, starting from your consumer, starting from your producer, starting from your dismantler. So everybody is being sensitized. So in that context, and also with reference to the sophistication, with reference to those technologies, so they have made a huge and tremendous growth, particularly in that sector. But if we look at Indian context, yes, India is doing also proactively, particularly in this, after implementing that the waste management rules 2016. But there are few things have to be done, and because this is not somebody should do it on individual basis. This is a collective effort. So that collective effort has to come from everybody, starting from your consumer, starting from your producer, starting from who is bringing from the other parts of the world, means assembler and dismantler. So and the government enforcement agency. So they have to work hand in hand, and so definitely as of now the situation is not that very promising, because still those informal mode is gaining popularity, but still the efforts are always there, and efforts are there to make it streamlined, and so that we can efficiently do it. So thank you very much. So in the next class we will like to see more on the way this particular electronic waste management, or particularly with reference to the way forward, how things we have to move. Thank you.